Hey everyone, Dr. Green here with the chapter on project planning from Headfirst Software Engineering. Hey, here we go. We are going to talk about some of the key concepts in here as well as all the things you need to remember. So, key concepts. First, every project is going to take too long. This is the major issue with software projects. This is one of the main reasons we have software engineering. Estimating, it's hard. Staying on time, it's very difficult. My advice to you is always make good estimates and always underestimate and over deliver. It's better to promise too little and then impress people than it is to promise too much and then make them think that you're inept or unable to accomplish what you've said you've done. There will always be other things that get in the way. People have lives outside of work. You may be at work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, but we have kids, we have families, we have sicknesses, there's deaths, there's events, there's all kinds of things going on. There's weekends, there's holidays. You have to remember that life requires balance. Your people that work for you can't just work all the time. You cannot take on every responsibility and work all the time. You have to maintain balance, and that means estimating and planning in a way that keeps your schedule on track. We'll also talk about this concept called velocity. That's how fast you and your team move through work. You can really apply this to any aspect of your life, but it's really important because it gives you a great gauge for how quickly your team is working, how well they are working, and what types of problems they work well on. We'll also talk about this thing called burn down charts. We're going to get to that, so let's move on. First off, everything's going to go too long. That's why we want to keep iterations short. We want to keep them balanced. So you've heard me say multiple times, and your book has said this, keep iterations under 30 days. I still recommend 5 to 10 days max. That's 5 to 10 working days or 1 to 2 weeks for an iteration. Try to keep every iteration at that level. If you go longer than that, the work becomes unmanageable and it's hard to actually estimate and plan. Too short, a day or two iteration, that just doesn't make sense because you can't get enough work done. When things get impossible, when the schedule breaks, the thing you have to do is talk to your client. One thing you're going to realize about the Agile method is that you always keep the client in the loop. We work with a high level of transparency and communication, especially with the client. So when you have to change things, call your client. Say, hey, this isn't working. We're not going to make this deadline. We need to do some things. And the first thing I would say you do is categorize all of your user stories and tasks into essentials. That's what goes into the minimum viable product or the smallest product that would be acceptable as working. Musts, things that are required, they're core features of the software. Likes, those are things that we would like to see in the software, but if they're not there, we can always add them later. And then dreams, those are the big ticket items that are really, really hard. You're not really sure about them, but they're not really required for the first 1 or 2 releases of the software. By doing this, you'll be able to split things into milestones or musts, right? Milestones are just a numbered version of the software that says, hey, we're releasing this as something that actually works. It actually completes some set of tasks or issues or stories or whatever that is. Okay? And that's how you get your minimum viable product, and that's the minimum product that actually works. These are all really important, and there's much more depth to some of these in your book. So please do read those and do the activities as well. In addition, do realize adding people doesn't always work. Sometimes we say, well, there's one of me. Let's hire somebody. Okay. The first couple weeks is going to go slow, but after that, your productivity is going to increase because you have someone you trust you can work with. This works until we get up to about 5 to 7 people. Why is that? Well, it's because with every person we add, we have to add an additional line of communication. In fact, if you have n people, you will end up with n times n minus 1 over 2 lines of communication. We know from management studies and from psychology that when that hits about 5 to 7 people, that's when things start to break down. And instead of working faster, you start working more slowly. You start adding less performance. So always try to work in teams of less than 7 at the most. Teams larger than that will have a tough time coordinating. 5 is really optimal. From all my experience, a team of 5 is awesome. You can almost always get everybody on the same call in the same room making the same decisions. Once you go up to 7, you always have 1 or 2 people missing. So keep iterations short, keep them balanced, focused on your MVP and milestones, and adding people doesn't always improve things. The second idea we talked about was other things get in the way, right? Remember that personal lives matter. Fatigue kills. If you have people that are tired, that are cutting sleep, that are working 80 hours a week, their performance is going to go down. Then they're going to get sick. That's the worst. Right? You don't want anybody to get sick. You don't want anybody to get hurt. You don't want anybody to be in poor mental or physical health. So you need to make sure you write up iteration schedules and project schedules that accommodate individuals. Right? In addition to this, I'd really like to mention meetings. For some reason, folks love to have meetings. And I get it. We like to see each other face to face. We like to talk things out. But here's the truth of the matter. Most meetings could be solved in an email. You have to be really careful about meetings, and those time suck. And if you're a project manager, you want to protect your team as much as possible from meetings that take away from their productivity time. And these are just things to keep in mind. On to velocity. So one thing I have learned in all my experience as a software engineer is that developers and engineers definitely think in utopian days. What they say is, oh, I have a month. Well, 1 month is only 20 actual working days. And for an actual person, that's only 14 days of work. Okay? So you have to think about this. When I worked professionally, one of the things that we would do is we would estimate jobs. My boss would multiply that estimate by 4, and then his boss would multiply that estimate by 4. Why? Because I was thinking in utopian days. My boss was half a developer, and he was still thinking in utopian days. So we were just building slack into our schedule to be able to handle everything that we did. So the way we accommodate this in Agile is thinking about velocity, okay? And always thinking about that velocity first. It will help you build great confidence in your estimates and in your team. And velocity is really simple. Velocity is just works like this. You take the days of work that you're going to do, you divide it by the velocity your team works at, and it gives you the number of days required. So the average team works at a velocity of 0.7. If you worked at a velocity of 1 or above 1, that means you are perfect or better. Nobody is perfect. Nobody is better than perfect. 0.7 is an average. Newer teams will have a lower velocity. So you'll see here 5 divided by 0.7, 5 days of work divided by a velocity of 0.7 is 7.5 or 7.14 days of actual work, and we just round that up to 7.5. This is really important because you have to integrate this into your project and iteration planning. Note this is a formula, so you can move things around to calculate any of these days. It's no big deal. When you do this, this will help you to achieve that goal of always under-promising and over-delivering. That's what impresses people. That's what makes your team confident. That's what makes people love you. When you are honest and clear and you say, this is what we really think we can get done, and you slightly under-promise and then consistently over-deliver, that will change the way clients view you. So we've had these 3 things, and we have one last tool in our toolbox to help us in iteration planning, and that's burn down charts. This is a screenshot of a burn down chart from GitLab, which you will be seeing. Burn down charts are very straightforward. You just have a plot on the y-axis of work remaining, and then days remaining on the x-axis. You have a nice line straight down the middle, that dotted line, which shows you the ideal path. You will bump around this all the time, up and down, left and right. If you're going underneath that line, you're working really fast, and your velocity is very high, often above 1. A velocity of 1 would put you perfectly on this line, and a velocity above this line would mean you're a little slower, right? You're having a little lower velocity. Generally, we want to try to keep to this line as much as possible. We want to get going down, but things will happen. You'll see this line jump, but this is just one tool to give us a quick visual representation. You will be able to see this in GitLab if you go to Issues and Milestones. It's a really wonderful tool, and we'll be talking about how to build this chart when we do estimates in future assignments. So that's the overview for Chapter 3. Okay, we have all these key concepts. It's going to take too long. Other things get in the way. Velocity matters, and burn down charts help. Please read the chapter, do all the activities, and participate in the discussion this week. And take care.